2 minutes early. So this is basically our last big event of the year. We're gonna cap it off with our guest speaker, Sino Talk. If you haven't followed him on Instagram, please do. He's like a super good resource. All right. If you want to learn about China, PLA, go follow his IG account. Super good information. He's been in the Marine Corps working Intel. Now he's the main Indo-Pacific desk chief for Atlas News. If you guys read some of that, used to write for Lethal Minds Journal. So super smart guy, and we're lucky to have him here. The floor is yours.
Cool. Thank you, Luke. Yeah, as he said, my name is Sino Talk. You can call me Joaquin Camarena as well during this meeting. So today I'm going to talk to you guys about a subject that is on everyone's mind, especially yours, the PLA. So we're going to go over the 15 topics. And if you want to ask questions during the presentation, please do. Or if not, you can hold them until the end. So let's go ahead and get started. So why China wants to reunify, quote unquote, with Taiwan? It's three main reasons. So the first one is the great rejuvenation of China. From China's viewpoint, especially from Xi Jinping, he sees reunification with Taiwan as fixing one of the unresolved issues from the 100 years of humiliation. Whenever China, this great nation, was at its lowest, being extorted by foreign powers, by foreign barbarians. And so, but this is also has to do with Japan as well, since China essentially lost Taiwan after its defeat in the first Sino-Japanese War. It fought with Japan. And so that's another aspect, is that they want to right that wrong. They felt that they should have never lost. They felt as if they should have never gave up Taiwan in that regard. And then the second one is that it allows the PLA unrestricted access to the Philippine Sea and Western Pacific as a whole. It breaks the first island chain and it renders it ineffective. So the first island chain refers to a line stemming from the Kuril Islands up north, far north, Russian territory, all the way down to Japan, running through Japan, Okinawa, Taiwan, of course, and the Philippines. And so what really hinges this together is Taiwan, because it's literally seen as the focal point to be able to break apart that chain, if you will. And so for the PLA, if they were to take over Taiwan, they would be able to not only gain access to the Taiwanese military bases there, but then also build their own bases, especially along the eastern coast. And that would give them unfettered access to the Pacific. But then also, it would also allow China to control or interdict the sea lanes around Japan, which the Japanese, they view that as a red line on their end, that Taiwan, Chinese control over Taiwan, for them is a existential threat for them. So that would actually explain why China has been rearming. Not only that, but also increase its alliances, not only with the United States, but with the Philippines as well, and also making some outreach to Taiwan as well, unofficially. And then it allows China to remove the counter argument for why Chinese people can have democracy. So this is one is more along the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP. Their claim for continue holding on to power is that China's too big for democracy. If we give you guys democracy, we give you guys a chance to make your own decisions, it will only lead to chaos, like what happened during the warlord era. And we can't have chaos. You don't want chaos. You want to have money. You want to be able to make rich. You want to be able to be billionaires and stuff like that. So just let us be in charge and we'll do this for you. Another aspect is that they also argue that Chinese culture is incompatible with democracy. That another famous argument is that, well, Chinese culture, we never had the ability to choose people for to rule. We never really had that. It was either through divine right or through the barrel of a gun, quoting Mao. However, this argument flies in the face of Taiwan, a vibrant democracy, a young democracy, I should add, that totally goes against that narrative. And not only that, but the other narrative that China is too big, because you have a country who is multi-ethnic. It has the Chinese majority, and it also has significant minorities of not only foreigners, expats, but then also the Aboriginal people that still exist within on the island as well. So it counters the argument really effectively. Going into the PLA's amphibious capabilities, you can view it as made up of two parts from two different services. The PLA Army Amphibious Combined Arms Brigade, and then also not to be outdone, the 6th Marine Brigades that the Chinese Marine Corps has. However, this was not always the case. Before the reforms in 2016, 2017, the 6 brigades were actually 6 divisions, or 3 divisions, let's just say. They were 3 divisions. And the PLA Marine Corps was at most 2 brigades, but one was more of a quasi-training brigade. But after the reforms, it expanded. They broke down the brigades of the amphibious mechanized divisions into 6 brigades, and then also increased significantly the size of the Chinese Marine Corps. And as you can see on the table, that's the locations as well as the names for the brigades for both the Marine Corps and Army. Now, going into amphibious vessels, you can break it up into major assets and then also minor. So you got your LHAs, LPDs, LSTs. Those of you who are probably in the MECEPs or had some time or spent some time in the Marine Corps before getting out and coming back in as a veteran will know what these are. So right now, China has 3 LHAs, LPDs 6, and LSTs around 28 or so, maybe less, maybe 3 less. And then for minor amphibians, they have a lot more. So I'm talking about landing ship mediums, landing ship utilities, LCUs and LSMs respectively. And then also landing ship helicopter. It's a vessel that's really small. It looks like an LST, but it has the ability to land helicopters on it and take off. They're really small, and I put them in the minor amphibious category because of their limited range. And which kind of leads me to the second bullet point. Those minor amphibs will more likely be used for the final movement to the landing sites just because of the limited range. So they're going to be more likely. So the PLA will likely need to capture Pyongyang island group in order to use those minor amphibs. Maybe they could. Another alternative is for them to do some type of ferry system, have them stage off the coast of Taiwan, and have them transfer the troops from the ferries to the LSTs, or to the amphibs. But honestly, that takes too much work, and then two, they haven't really trained for that, so it's more likely they're going to take over Peng Ho island chain before they conduct their main assault on Taiwan. That being said, all these amphibs, major, minor, even the few that they're building today, when you add them up, they only have the dedicated amphibious vessel capacity to carry 6 brigades. So they're essentially going to be carrying all of the amphibious combined arms brigades or the Marine Corps brigades. So, but it is likely that they will carry either all of the amphibious combined arm brigades as an entire force, or do half and half, 3 brigades of the amphibious combined arms brigade, and then 3 for Marine Corps, and then use ad hoc amphibious vessels that they recreation from civilian sources. So your civilian roll on, roll off, submergible ships that are able to carry some of those minor amphibs, just to be able to generate enough capacity to conduct those initial landings. So capabilities in invading Taiwan. I broke it up into 3: logistical, transport, and command and C2, or command and control C2. So logistical, the PLA is deficient in various subsets that are required for a large-scale amphibious landing like what would occur in Taiwan. So what I'm talking about is expedition capability, logistical capabilities, being able to project logistical power through their dedicated supply chain that were set up before the invasion. Not only that, but medical evacuation and casualty care is another one that is very significant. And then also wartime reserves. They may have the ability to conduct amphibious invasion for 3 months, or sustain one for 3 months, but anything beyond that, it would be iffy. And by that time, they would have to either have transitioned their entire economy to a war economy, or try to do something to where they can focus their various industries to supporting the invasion. Not only that, but they never conducted a large-scale sustainment exercise beyond the tactical, maybe operational level, to test their capabilities. And again, this is especially important, not only because it allows them to see, but then this not only allows them to see where various kinks within the supply chain can occur, but then also how are they going to operate in southeast Taiwan, especially around Fujian province, because it's mountainous. I don't know if you've seen the stereotypical geographical paintings of Taiwan during the various state visits. It's very mountainous, has a lot of flowing rivers, high waterfalls. That would be Fujian. Fujian's not a flat place. It's not like a plain. It has maybe a sliver of coastal plains running through it, but then everything beyond that, it's very mountainous, it's very hilly, It has a lot of rivers running through it. So for the PLA, that would be another issue that they would have to solve. And for people who are probably who are thinking about going to SF or other type of soft component, that would probably be your bread and butter in the event of a Taiwan invasion. Secondly, transport. I kind of hopped on this on the logistical bullet, but I'm gonna go more specific. So the PLA lacks dedicated amphibious capabilities to transport all units needed, and I mentioned before that they're going to use roll-on, roll-off vessels and other civilian vessels, but then also it's just the fact that a lot of these vessels are not really standardized. They're not really, they obviously were not built to be used in that regard. That's what a lot of people don't realize. And so for their, and so one way that the Chinese solved this problem was standardizing how these vessels are built, saying that any amphib or any roll-on roll-off ferry or vessel has to be built in these modifications. Not only that, but we've actually seen them produce kits that have the same mechanized door as some of these amphibious vessels. They'll be able to take off the take off the take off the the door slash ramp of the various roll-on roll-off ferries, and then put that specially made door on, and then that solves one of the main issues of amphibious of having amphibious vessels. Because before, one of the main issues that they found out, unfortunately, is that the door that a lot of these vessels have are unable to support the rate of a fully loaded type 05 infantry fighting vehicle or light tank. There's actually is footage that was leaked of the actual one vessel or one vehicle just nose diving straight into the ocean after being unloaded or after attempting to offload from the LST or from the ferry. It's quite funny. So again, they can use amphibious, the minor amphibs, but the limited range is still a major limitation. So that's why I say they're going to have to capture Peng Ho. Not only that, but transportation is also important on the back end. Going back to what I said previously about the roadway, about the terrain means that a lot of the infrastructure, whether it be railroad, roadway, riverway, have a lot of choke points. And these choke points allow would force the Chinese to, one, divert whatever reinforcement or forces trying to get to the beach landing sites or ports if they decide to use them. And then also but then also it would strain a lot of the infrastructure, meaning that if they do decide to do this, that infrastructure would likely not be able to handle the maximum capacity or the number of vehicles that is going to be flowing through Fujian and southeastern China. And then command and control. So broke this one up into two parts. Logistical nodes. They have a good, they understand that logistics are important. The PLA does, and that goes back to the time of Mao. Whenever Mao was fighting first the Japanese, or forgive me, but fighting Chiang Kai-shek, and then also the Japanese, and then Chiang Kai-shek again. They understand that logistics is important. And so in that regard, they have logistical C2 nodes from the tactical to the operational level that has a decentralized capability, but is also highly survivable. So what this means is that if the commander of the operation decides to conduct an op in one part of Taiwan to seize the initiative, then those nodes will be directed to go help them. They actually have their own like little C2 structure, be able to break off the decentralized capability. And not only that, but China also understands that these nodes need to be highly survivable, especially from kinetic and then also cyber attacks. And so that's another thing that they've tried to increase or have increased is their survivability. However, this makes it, even though they try to increase the survivability, these nodes are usually centralized, meaning that we'll be able to find them relatively easy, even if they are decentralized. We'll be able to tell where those nodes are at. And these nodes are easily targeted because of that. Not only that, but if you were to take out let's just say we take out a C2 node that supports that operation in Taiwan, in a specific area, that will cause that operation to falter because one, the logistical C2 node is no longer there. And there's no backup. There's no redundancy. So the PLA is hoping that the decentralized nature of it and also the survivability would actually work, actually prevent that from happening, but it would likely be able to be targeted. And then going on to the joint C2 aspect, right now, the integrated joint operations will be the main concept that will be used in the theater command level until its successors are developed. So what this means is that I'm going to talk about this more in the joint operations slide, but it's currently the main doctrine for how the PLA will conduct C2 operations, joint C2 operations. And then going down to the tactical level, the C2 at the tactical level likely has coordination and integration issues, especially amongst the companies and battalions during the operation. We see that during joint operations, especially in the company and battalion level, and moreover between the PLA, Marine Corps, and as well as the Army. Not only that, but the Air Force's airborne units as well. And then finally, the Chinese Communist Party's influence on the military operation. Xi Jinping would more than likely send his own, lack of a better term, lackey or political commissar to the Eastern Theater Command that would be in charge of any operation against Taiwan. And so that would act as one, a deterrence effect with the PLA commander, because that political commissar will more likely be making decisions or have a significant say in decisions. Not only that, but will be reporting back to Xi directly. And so that would have what's called a chilling effect or a freezing effect on any decision making that the commander would have. And in fact, we suspect it may cause micromanagement and then also passing the buck, if you will, meaning that these individuals will not make the decision if it means them losing their head, both figuratively and literally.
I've got a question.
Yeah,
Can you hear me okay?
yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. When you talk about like nodes, what does that like look like on the battlefield? I mean, are you talking about like a collection of people in a room somewhere? What do you mean nodes, and how are they spotted and targeted?
So nodes would be anything from a small C2 command, like a C2 truck or a van or anything like that, all the way up to a tent. Now, how they're able to be targeted, I can only speculate because of the nature of this brief. But more than likely be able to use imagery intelligence, signals intelligence, special forces or reconnaissance elements to be able to go in there and say, hey, we're fine. We have, we're picking up stuff at this location. We suspect that it's something important. Can you go out and look at it and report back? And they'll go out and report back.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And then the CCP's influence on and the relationship with the PLA and why it's important. So the CCP has ultimate authority over the PLA. This is important to note for several reasons, because the PLA is for intents and purposes an armed wing of the CCP. It's not it's not a Chinese military, it's China's de facto military. So you have to think about it in that regard. And what this means is that the CCP has tremendous amount of influence and authority over the organization through the Commissars and the CCP's Central Military Commission. Now, you may be asking, but Joaquin, there's two. It's like, of course, there's two. One is the bureaucratic Central Military Command, and the other one is the CCP's command, military CMC. Now, it's important to note that at the end of the day, the Central Military Commission for the CCP has total control, will have absolute control over it, regardless if the bureaucratic CMC says anything or the Ministry of National Defense says anything. In fact, the Ministry of National Defense is not even within the command structure for the CMC. The minister has a say because he's one of the top people within the CMC, but ultimately his power is not really there. He doesn't really have power. And so this authority goes all the way down to the company and perhaps the platoon level. And for the company and above, they'll have, party committees where the deputy commander or the XO would be the commissar. And then the deputy for the party committee would be the CO, the commanding officer, if you will. So think of it as any outfit. So K2, their CO would be the deputy chief of the party committee for K2, and the commissar would be the XO. Forgive me for using K2 if there's any cadets in there from that outfit. So that's how it would work. But then going down to the platoon level, the PL would fulfill both roles, i.e. meaning he would be both the deputy commander or both the deputy commissar and then also the head commissar. So the CCP's power rings through all levels of operation, regardless of where it is. And the reason why ultimately is that Mao emphasized control over this during his studies, no matter if it's back whenever during his Yanani years, the Long March, or the Sangxi years, or even during power, he emphasized this very much so. And as you can see by the quote, political power, from his viewpoint, goes out of the barrel of a gun. And that's the reason why. That's actually one of the reasons, or the main reason, why you see the two previous leaders of China, Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao, leave the various positions that they did as Chinese leaders. So they first they left the presidency, and then secondly they left the CCP general secretary's position, and then a year later, almost a year later, then they'll hand over formal control of the CMC to their successor. And that's because, one, the CCP has to have control over the PLA no matter what. But then also Tiananmen plays a significant role in this too. But then also during the Xi era, he re-emphasized and increased the CCP's control over the PLA. And this is because, one, the absolute immense amount of corruption that occurred within the PLA at the time he took over. Not only that, but also the immense amount of influence that the PLA had. So before 2012, the CCP allowed the PLA they loosened the control of the PLA. And it got to the point where the PLA was in many ways its own thing. Like, a lot of people, maybe they would listen to the CCP, and also it was its own power base. It had its own power bases, so it was in many ways an alternative power base to the CCP itself. And so that's the reason why Xi Jinping conducted his corruption campaign against the PLA, and why it continues even to today. But also Tiananmen Square, this is the closest that the CCP came to losing power. And it was because of the PLA, several of the officers, including generals, said they either dragged their feet or just said outright, like, we're not going to shoot our own people. Like, we're supposed to be the People's Liberation Army. Shouldn't we listen to the people's demands? Paraphrase from the Beijing garrison commander during the protest. And so that's the reason why you've seen that's the reason why if you look at what units actually responded to the Tiananmen Square uprising or protest, that's the reason why they got them from all the way from Tibet, just to make sure that there was no one that would be opposed to the massacre. And then also there would be no one directly connected to the Beijing area. That was another significant thing, is that a lot of these people didn't want to shoot the people that they knew. Because at that time, the PLA actually recruited and set up units directly from cities and towns or locations or areas where they lived. But no more after that. So the PLA's officer and NCO corps reforms. So as a part of the wider reforms on the PLA, You also seen it in the officer and NCO Corps, and it was meant to align them to more of the Western counterparts. So, such as United States military, U.S. Marine Corps, Army, things such as that, and then as well as UK and and the various other European countries as well. However, one of the things that they've always run into whenever after they did these reforms was that retention was difficult. They're trying to they try to keep the officers and NCOs that actually were good at their jobs. They were proficient at their jobs. They knew how to lead. These people were what they wanted in the PLA. However, much like several individuals such as myself or several individuals such as myself or others, they thought that we can go out and leave the Marine Corps or leave the Army, leave the US military and go do quote unquote bigger, better things, or they just got tired of the quote unquote games. Because what a lot of people don't realize about the PLA is that it's very hard. They've a lot of the locations that they get stationed at are very desolate. They don't really want to stay in. I mean, to be completely honest, and I don't know if there's any MECEPs or veterans in here, it would be akin to us going to 29 Palms or Fort Irwin for 4 or 5 years. Your morale for staying in or want to staying in would be pretty low at that point. But then also with that, they understand that like the United States, they have benefits. They have their own VA. They have their own programs that allow them to not only start their own business, but also give them jobs, to be pre-selected for jobs. So that's another reason why retention is so difficult. So going down to the NCO Corps, since I was a former NCO, one of the main things that the PLA wanted to do was that to increase their ability to lead and train. Now, they've made some leeway into this, significant leeway, I should say. There's still issues, but there's still issues within the NCO Corps that prevents it from actually being a true NCO Corps. And then the first one is that it does not, the officer corps still gives a lot of grief to the NCOs, even though they're supposed to be a professionalized organization as well. The NCO, Chinese PLA officers look down upon the along the enlisted, especially NCOs. They still do in some regards, even if the PLA is trying to push them, literally push them to interact with the enlisted. So there's that. So that's one major issue. And then the second one is that retention. After a Chinese soldier does his 2 years, he can leave. And for a conscript, like, I'm done. I can flee. I'm free. And so for them, they can't really retain the necessary NCO that they want. And then the third one is that the lack of representation within the PLA, within the CCP party committees. Because even at the party committee level, they still have to have some type of representation for NCOs. They actually have seats. It actually is spelled out in the NCCP/PLA regulations. However, the officers don't really abide by those regulations, abide by them, because they look down upon them. Now, for the officer corps, they have increased professionalization and competency to be more in line to Western officers rather than the Soviet model or even the Maoist type model. But again, issues still remain. Again, going back to lack of respect, lack of trust in the enlisted, but then also the professionalization. You kind of, there's no real centralized place to learn skills. It's more of a hodgepodge of different academies, universities, institutes that all vie for seats. And there's only so many seats available. They have tried to send some of these officers to universities to get some level of training or some level of knowledge, but it's hit or miss because one, family life. A lot of these officers usually have families, and then two, some of these officers don't want to do that. They just choose not to. They just choose not to go in, not to continue. So another aspect of this is that whenever they try to retain pilots, they have a hard time in retaining them or even recruiting them. And this led to a lot of issues in trying to train and find people to fly, especially fly their carrier-based jet fighters, and the Air Force as well, but mainly in the Navy. And so that's the reason why there's been a drastic increase in the people trying to, and the PLA recruiting, opening up their recruiting to graduate students, females, especially in the carrier program, carrier plane program, and then also older individuals. And then shooting tactics and small unit tactics. So shooting qualifications is very bare minimum. Only use 5 rounds to qualify. It's emphasized stationary targets and static firing positions. It's a stark contrast to what the U.S. Marine Corps and Army and the Australian Defense Forces and some other Western militaries are transitioning to be able to shoot and move much like you would do in an environment. Trying to import realistic training. However, with the PLA, you kind of see them as being still stuck in doing table 1, table 2, if you're in the Marine Corps and you know what that is. If you know the previous shooting qualifications, table 1 and table 2, or in the Army, their shooting standards. And so for designated marksmen, it harms the unit in some ways because they directly recruit people who shoot the best. And some of these the training is usually done at the brigade level at all the brigades. So there's no centralized syllabus. There's no centralized training saying that, a designated marksman has to be able to shoot someone from, or be able to shoot a human-sized target from X number of meters away. So for snipers, you see robust training, like the DMs. They're trained at the brigade level, but their training is more intensive to be able to conduct sniping missions and also special reconnaissance missions. And then small unit tactics, 1 squad will equal 3 3-man fire teams. That's for all the platoon, for all squads that are found throughout the combined armed brigades or the amphibious brigades or marine brigades. It's always going to be like that. There is some similarity in the tactics that the PLA, that those squads use in terms of compared to Western militaries. So wedge, So your reg formation, your line, column line, etc. There is some overlap. However, there is going to be some differences. And then for CQB, I know it's not on there, but for CQB, it's unit dependent. They train on it for however they feel, whenever they feel like it. In other words, if they want to become proficient at it, or if they want to increase their units' knowledge of it. However, the organization that actually has the most proficiency in CQB is the People's Armed Police, because realistically, they will be the ones to use it. So the PLA's view on disinformation. So the PLA, they view the disinformation as just an extension of the three warfares, which I'm going to talk about that in the next slide, as propaganda and psychological warfare strategies. But there's no clear doctrine for the PLA operations in social media, even though they love it. They love it. They understand the power of social media from similar operations by the CCP through apps like TikTok, unfortunately. And we know this through the PLA writing several papers and articles about this, about potential strategy and document. However, we don't really know if they have achieved an operationalization of an approach to this. They love it, but there's no real definitive proof that shows that, yes, they moved from theory to actual doctrine. And a lot of people suspect is that the elections in Taiwan would more likely illustrate that, because there was a lot of disinformation activity from China during that time. So here comes the command and control and joint Sync 2 concept. Like I said previously, integrated joint operations concept, it will be the concept that the PLA will use for the next 10 to 20 years. There's a definition essentially saying that they're going to bring all the technologies that they have right now and in the future and blend them into an operations system to be able to use them as a wholly integrated unit. However, there may be successors. So one of them is multi-domain integrated joint operations, or joint operations under the conditions of intellectualization. These are more theory than actual doctrine or concept as of right now. But I'm willing to bet that it's going to be the joint operations under conditions of intellectualization that would become the main PLA doctrine, or the main successor to IJO, because of who's talking about it, who's pushing out, who's actually producing the articles. And then with that, all domain operations, it replaced its predecessor, the information system-based system of systems operational capability. It's fairly recent, probably around 2 to 3 years. And one of the main issues is that the PLA does not have a clear definition of the word domain, or U. And it's important to point this out because they use it in different manners, such as how we would use domain in describing a COCOM command. So Southern Command, Northern Command, etc. But then also they also use domain to talk about actual domains, like land domain, air domain, sea domain, cyber intelligence. So that's one major issue, that there's not really a firm definition of what they would consider domain, or at least none that actually has been put out for the world to see by the PLA or any of the PLA authors who write about this. And then the other issue is that how would it actually interact with the warfighting concepts and doctrines that they produce, that they have right now and also in the future. So right now, warfighting doctrine for the PLA and strategy. So right now, the current doctrine is active defense. They have 3 ways of fighting it: warfighting, military deterrence, and military operations other than war. The military operations other than war aspect is 3 warfares. One of them I talked about, the disinformation aspect, psychological, but then also public opinion, which kind of has some overlay with both psychological and legal. But it is important to highlight as its own separate entity because of the immense power public opinion can have, as noted in the Israel conflict or Gaza conflict, Ukraine conflict, or even domestically within TikTok. And the PLA and the CCP actually understand this. And then with that, the strategy, systems, destruction, warfare. There's the definition is a victory of what the PLA views as victory under this strategy. And so one of the more interesting aspects of this, though, is how the PLA will use conventional strike capabilities, quote unquote, to achieve victory. One is kinetic, something that we would all know as, bombs to foreheads, warheads to foreheads, cruise missiles, things such as that. However, they also strongly emphasize a non-kinetic aspect of this too. So going back, cyber is plays significantly in this. Legal and psychological as well, to include social media. And then another strategy that will be used in conjunction with SDW is multi-domain precision warfare, which I'm going to go ahead and call it out. This is essentially multi-domain operations with Chinese characteristics. So, and what I mean by that is that it shares a lot of similarity in terms of how the PLA will align all the domains through the integration of command and control, communications, computers, intelligence, surveillance, ISR systems to be able to conduct operations across all domains. And that's where the main similarity is with MDO. So the strategic support force and its role in future operations. For people who are for expeditionary amphibious basing operations, I'm going to bring this up. I'm going to segue into my beliefs in this on this slide. One of the 2 new branches created from the reforms in 2017, the PLA combined several active PLA units that handled cyber network communications, so S6 or G6, space, information operations, electronic warfare, all into one organization instead of having it as their own each individual entity. However, there are issues likely to remain within the SSF. One of the main ones is that the continuation of stovepipes, meaning the cordoning off of information. And that's important to highlight because that's why the PLA created the SSF, is to eliminate that specific weak point. However, there's still some indications that it still likely remain. So it will take time to see if it actually has fixed that issue. And then the other one, another major issue would be just exactly how the different entities would operate in a joint environment or jointly. So when I say that, how does intelligence, their version of G2 would operate with cyber or network communications, the G6, if you will, or space, which more likely will fall under G3 operations, and as well as information. How would it all fit together? Right now, we kind of speculate on how it would look in terms of their own command structure, and as well as the liaison elements as well. But it's more theory on our part than anything concrete. And then another one would be civilian military fusion is a significant factor in its creation. And the reason why the PLA did this was to bring in talent to increase the PLA's overall capabilities. Because right now, or at least whenever it was created, they still had issues, especially in their R&D department. But now, with their ability to bring on what are considered contractors, for all intents and purposes, you kind of see their R&D capabilities increase significantly. There are still some issues such as how can civilians integrate effectively? How can the PLA integrate civilians effectively within the SSF or in the joint logistics force? And then as well as what regulations do these individuals fall under? Do they fall under CCP regulations or / bureaucratic, or do they fall under military organization regulations? In which we've seen the PLA produce some regulations that says this is how civilians would act when they're under the employ of the SSF, but it's more of a ad hoc solution than anything. And their role in Taiwan, this is where they will play a significant role in logistics. And so the reason why I chose this slide to segue is because in many ways, the issues that will affect the PLA, especially with this SSF, we more likely will see in the Marine Corps, because there hasn't really been much thought in how to conduct the logistical component. And the reason why I bring up the logistical component to the Marine Corps' concept, as Luke could attest to, is logistics is very important. You need to be able to provide logistics to these to the men stationed on all these little atolls or islands or inlets to be able to conduct operations. Not only that, but to survive. And from my perspective is that the Marine Corps was short-sighted in that regard, because we know how easily these islands can be cut off, because we did it with the Japanese in World War II. And so one of the main arguments or main counters to my argument is that, well, Joaquin, we have boats. We can just simply, deliver supplies to the boats. I'm like, yes, I get that. But what about during wartime? So you're telling me that under wartime conditions, you're able to send out boats to deliver supplies to whatever detachment is on Banty's Island or Mitrice Island and the Luzon Strait. So you tell me you're able to do this. Like, well, I mean, it's more complicated than that. It's not really. I mean, it's either you do or you don't. And it's, my opinion, it's very short-sighted on the Marine Corps that they did that, or they chose to go in that direction. And then, but going more into the branches of the PLA, first off, I'm going to talk about the Chinese Marine Corps. So as I mentioned previously, they expanded from 2 brigades, 1 operational, 1 quasi-training brigade, to six brigades, 6 Marine brigades. But in addition to that, they also have a new aviation brigade. But for all intents and purposes, it has probably the size of a reinforced regiment. And it's primarily made up of Z8s and Z9s, so both medium utility helicopters. But then also with that, they've attached a special operations brigade as well, the Jiaolong Brigade, to the Marine Corps to act as its soft component. Not only that, along with that, there's also a significant doctrinal shift that was seen in the Chinese Marine Corps after the 2017 reforms. So before that, the plan was, or the Marine Corps was only two brigades because they weren't really expected to play a role in a Taiwan invasion. The then 3 divisions were supposed to always be the main effort. The planned Marine Corps was like, yeah, you can go and take those little rocks that are outside off the island, but just go, you can do that. But their bread and butter pre-reforms was island seizure in the South China Sea. So that's the reason why those 2 battalions, the 1st and 164th Brigades, were always based in the South, in the Southern Fleet. But after the reforms and the significant expansion, you now find 2 brigades each in all 3 fleets. 2 in the northern fleet, 2 in the eastern fleet, and 2 in the southern fleet. And the aviation brigade and the spec op brigade is in the northern fleet area of responsibility. I believe they're in either in Dalian or in Shandong province. However, with that being said, they made the shift to being a true expeditionary force in readiness, if you will, but with Chinese characteristics, and an amphibious force. However, there are significant issues seen in this shift. Mainly is that there are a lot of issues with them learning how to conduct amphibious beach landings. Yes, you've probably seen a lot of videos of, PLA, ZDT or ZTD type 05s landing on the beach, being discharged from like LPD or LHA, gonna go take the beach. A lot of those videos are the mechanized brigades of the Army. We do see some Chinese Marine Corps units, but not really much. And the reason why is because they still have significant issues even now trying to overcome learning how to conduct amphibious beach landings. Not only that, but going down deeper, coordination issues. How can you coordinate with the unit next to you? And that's including the Marine Corps unit next to you. Because there has been a remarkable lack of coordination and integration between the amphibious brigades, as well as the Marine brigades and the paratrooper brigades. And the reason why I bring up the paratrooper brigades is because they too will play a role in any Taiwan invasion. And so you have this inability to, at the bare minimum, coordinate movements. So, but going forward, the future is more likely an additional increases of personnel. We may see them divest more brigades from the Army to the brigade or to the Marine Corps, like they did to increase the size. Not only that, but they also are receiving new equipment, such as a ZTQ-15 type light tank, the Z-10. They may receive the Z-10 light attack helicopter, the Z-20 medium utility helicopter, and the ZT-21 helicopter, heavy attack helicopter, and possibly even an amphibious version of the new Type 19 that is currently in testing / low level production. And I say new equipment for the regarding the 15 because previously they still operated their version of the PT-76. And while they did diverse those in favor of the light tank version of the Type 05, the Marine Corps still felt as if they needed a heavier tank or a heavier true tank. So that's the reason why they made a push to incorporate a lot of those. And we have seen exercises where they've actually landed those tanks using LCATs and as well as landing ship mediums. So the planned Marine Corps, planned Navy, or the plan is going through a modernization process, has an increased focus on the construction of surface vessels, such as the Type 055 Raineye class cruiser and the Type 054 frigate. And the reason why is because that China understands that they need to develop a true blue Navy capability, blue water capability. What that means is that there has been a less emphasis on building amphibious vessels. Yes, we've seen them build one or two during this time frame. However, in the same time frame, they built several times as many frigates, corvettes, destroyers, not only for the plan, but also for export as well. But then going further, the aircraft carrier program is one of the ones that actually benefited from their decreased emphasis on amphibious vessels. Right now, it's a Type 003 will be their first truly operational carrier whenever it does go into operation. Yes, the Liaoning and Shandong, it has conducted operations in the Western Pacific. But from my perspective, these have always been training carriers, meaning that the true carrier groups in the future, true PLA Navy carrier groups in the future will be based around either the Type 3 or the Type 004 that is likely to begin production either this year or next year. And then going further, the KJ 600, AWACS, J-15, and J-35 would provide the bulk of the future carrier wings, along with various drones. But again, limitations remain. One is that how are they able to incorporate all these different aircraft into one coherent air wing? And then two, the significant lack of experience in them even conducting operational sorties. Yes, I mentioned previously that they've conducted operations in the Western Pacific. However, the pictures that were produced from the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Ministry of Defense, as well as the various state-owned TV outlets are positioned on the carrier to take photos for propaganda purposes. Show a lot of the planes going slick, meaning there's no ordnance. They may have some air-to-air missiles on them, some light air-to-air missiles, but overall, it's them launching with more likely half to 3/4 of a tank of jet fuel and those two light missiles. We haven't really seen them practice in taking off in an operational environment with anything heavier, such as the PL-15 air-to-air missile, or any of the various heavier munitions like bombs, cruise missiles, land attack missiles. So that's a significant issue, because you need to be able to perform in that environment if you want to conduct sorties in it. So the Army's training on forward observation and JTAC capabilities and drone use. They have the foundations for a FO and JTAC capability. The doctrine and TTPs are developed mainly through Northern Theater Command units. We have seen some interplay with other theater command units, or other units from Western, Central, Eastern, and Southern commands, but it's mainly been a Northern Theater Command affair regarding developing this capability. And so with that being said, JTACs for the PLA are going to be called Aerial Fire Guides, or at least their version of it. And then not only that, but for target designators are going to be likely their FOs. The reason why we say likely is because their FOs, they train a lot of the Air Force train a lot of those target designators, and what we've seen from them during exercises, of what was described in what they did during those exercises, they were essentially getting a coordinate, getting all the pertinent information, taking that information and passing it off to an officer who's able to call in that mission, that fire mission. However, as I mentioned in the start, it's not mature. There's a significant lack of experience and coordination and integration between units and aircraft. And even then, when it does happen, it usually occurs with the higher echelon of that unit requesting CAS. So when I say that, the company commander will be the one to put in the request. It wouldn't be the person actually calling in the airstrike or the gun run. There's very little interplay or interaction between units and aircraft. And again, centralized control just increases the time that it takes for them to conduct these CAS missions. Even then, going further, we don't really see them conducting rotary wing CAS missions, in which, from my perspective, it's because of the PLA's risk averse attitude towards conducting reward exercises. They don't want to bring any harm to these capabilities, because news will come out that this occurred. It would undoubtedly will. And then the Army's drone use. Drones are found down to the squad level. Various exercises have shown that the squads have various drones attached with them and carry with them. They're able to use them from anything to recon to fire support missions, as well as being radio relay stations, airborne radio relay stations. However, they may in the future develop FPV drone capabilities, meaning they'll be able to carry a kamikaze drone to be able to be piloted by whoever's carrying it or whoever or the assistant. However, we haven't really seen that happen within the PLA yet. We've seen them test these drones out, but we haven't really seen them integrate them into the wider PLA. But one organization that actually has integrated their integrated drone use fairly effectively to include kamikaze drones is the PAP. They've been doing a lot of the stuff that you see in Ukraine before the invasion. They include kamikaze. They include kamikaze drones. So the Air Force, so the jet fighters, we're going to see an improved version of the J-20. That's because of one, the experience that the PLA gained from operating these aircraft since they became operational, but then also with that through industrial / cyber espionage as well. And the J-10 and J-11, we'll more likely see a new variant of the J-10 to further increase its capabilities, and then also finally see the J-11 reach initial operating capability. Going down further, the Chinese will more likely reverse engineer a copy of the Su-35 that they bought. They essentially played their hand when they ordered only 24, which is in line with previous orders of the J-11, which I think is which I believe is the Su-27, that they just copied and which they just copied and reverse engineered and now produced without any licensing. So they more likely will be making a copy of the Su-35. And then long-range power projection, the Y-20, the transporter, and the strategic transport aircraft, which is a C-5, I believe, reverse engineered C-5 and refueler. You're going to see them increase significantly the quantities that they have within the Air Force in the next few years. Not only that, but the H-6 stealth bomber will more likely be revealed within this year, if not the next. And then infrastructure advancements. They've received additional Air Force airfields and air bases on the plan. This is part of the plan that they've undertaken to streamline the Navy's aviation components capabilities. And they've moved a lot of those bases, and they moved a lot of the jet fighter units into those bases as well. So finally, the Rocket Force. So they are undergoing a modernization and reorganization with an emphasis on medium and intermediate missile systems. So, and the reason why is to increase their capabilities to fire, or to increase their capabilities to target United States and allied vessels that operate in the Western Pacific and the Philippine Sea. They also expanded a lot of their missile silos. However, they have expanded their missile silos beyond the number that they have of ICBMs, of silo-based ICBMs, which leads a lot of people to speculate that China will try to employ a conventionally armed ICBM, which in my opinion, I don't think they will, because they understand this. They will more likely figure out the sheer stupidity of, stupidity of that. And the reason why I frame it as that is because the United States previously did this as well in the 1960s and 70s. They ultimately shelved the program in the 70s and late 70s because they realized that there's no way for us there's no way for not even for us to detect and differentiate between a nuclear armed and a conventionally armed ICBM. And they looked at the Soviet Union and said, if we can't do that, I sincerely doubt that the Soviets can. But then not only that, you also seen a dramatic increase in multiple independently targeted reentry vehicles, MIRVs, that utilize different warheads. We're talking about being able to launch graphite dust into the air to prevent UAVs and aircraft from flying in that area because they're faulty electronics. Anti-runway warheads that are specifically designed to punch holes into runways in specific patterns, and various others. And like everything else in the PLA, we've also seen a doctrinal shift with the rocket force from saturation attacks from like the old Soviet and Maoist era. We're going to launch as many rockets and missiles as we can in that area and destroy everything. We're going to take out a grid square essentially, to more precision strikes, because they understand that while yes, we are taking out an entire grid square, the enemy could potentially survive that, meaning that we would have to waste more ammunition than what we already did. And also, the Desert Storm also played a role in this, and that it showed that the way of the future in terms of targeting is precision strikes. Be able to use one missile or bomb or PGM to take out one target, or multiple PGMs to take out a target. And then finally, the scandal and removal of senior officers. There's three likely reasons. One, which is the most popular, is the corruption, as a potential corruption scandal. Not only that, and then the second one, an intel leak, is the second most popular. And then the third one is power struggle between the PLA, the Patriotic New Rocket Force and Xi. I'm of the opinion that it was a power struggle because of how Xi handled the removal of the commanding general and the commissar. He removed them, and who he replaced them with. She replaced the commissar with a Air Force, from a high-level Air Force commissar from the Air Force. And she replaced the outgoing commanding general with the deputy commander, I believe, some high level or a senior official from the plan Chinese Navy. When you look at the sanitized biographies of these individuals though on the Chinese internet, you kind of see some stuff that would indicate why she picked them. Because even though it's relatively common for for Navy officers to move to the Air Force, or Army officers to move to the Rocket Force. It still was suspicious that he picked these two individuals. And what I found out is that these individuals may be part of Xi's power base. And because they were there at the same time as they were there in Fujian, serving different capacities at the same time as Xi. And so that leads me to believe that Xi either knows them directly or they are a part of Xi Jinping's power base. And so that leads me to, which further makes me suspect that it was a power struggle, because both the Rocket Force and the 2nd Artillery Corps has always been known as the Princeling Corps, aka where the children of senior CCP and PLA members go to serve out their conscription period or serve out their voluntary, quote unquote, time in the PLA, because there was relatively lack of concern that they would be involved in a war. That, and out of all the branches, the 2nd Artillery Corps was actually pretty decent in terms of treatment, because again, Pritzlings, they would have known each other, or known the families. And so over time, that actually created power bases that may have been opposed to Xi's modernization plan, because the modernization, the reorganization is Xi's plan. He wants to reorganize the Rocket Force. And they were more likely opposed to this because, one, it breaks up their power within the organization. And then two, it means that from their perspective, Xi would actually use them in a fighting war. Now, that's not to say that the corruption reason or the intel leak doesn't have its merits. They do. But my counter to the corruption is that, so my counter to the corruption one is that if it was about corruption and Li Xiaofu started this, the now former Chinese defense minister, why wasn't Zhang Yuxia also rolled up in this and brought up on formal charges and also dismissed from the CCP and PLA? Because Li directly served behind. Li was a successor to Zhang in his last two positions, especially the equipment department of the PLA, which was the focus of this investigation. And I asked people, so you're telling me that out of all the corruption in the PLA, Zhang Yuxia was the only saint? Magically, he was the only saint that did not break and partake in the corruption. And it's like, well, it's more complicated than that. And it's not really. It's one of those things in which, if one person within the PLA or Rocket Force is doing it, then more likely all of them are. Because corruption is an endemic within the PLA, even after Xi's little reforms. However, the intel leak also has merit as well, because of the Middlebury Institute report that came out in July of 2023 that illustrated a lot of information that it's kind of hard to find on open source media or open sources, Western and Chinese. So that kind of led a lot of people to suspect that it was possibly because of that. But in my opinion, but from my perspective, my counter argument is that anyone with Google Earth or the various other satellite companies subscriptions can spend 8 hours a day looking through satellite images and find those silos. Not only that, but these same individuals can find that information on the open source, on the open web. So it's may not be because of Intel leaks. It to me it just doesn't really make sense for it to be an Intel leak to cause almost the entire to cause like several of Rocket Force officers to become embroiled in this scandal. It just doesn't make sense. Because if it was an Intel leak, then why wasn't others involved in this in the Navy, in the Air Force, Army? So that's the end of the slideshow. So I'm gonna leave it open to anyone who has classes, or has questions, regardless of the information I presented today, or Indo-Pacific, or China, or anything else.
Yeah, I've got a question. What's China's stance on the civil war in Myanmar? Because I have heard absolutely nothing about that. So if you could show me in on that one.
So it's one of those things about China's position on Myanmar is that they don't really care who wins, because at the end of the day, they know whoever takes power will allow them to continue their supply operations within the country. But that being said, they also understand that they have to make good with a lot of these ethnic armies that are operating along the border between China and Myanmar. Not because they like them, it's because they're able to go after the criminal groups that operate scam casinos and scam centers all along the border. They scam hundreds of millions of people out of yen per year. In which the foreign ministry released a statement, I think on Tuesday, saying that, asking both sides to negotiate, please, because you're now hurting our trade, and that's a big red line for us.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Hey, so I just got a quick question. So this summer, I got an internship for about a month where I'm gonna be working on like some wargaming exercises and stuff along those lines. And I was wondering, specifically pertaining to the PLAN, if there's any sources that you recommend, or any like specific websites or anything to kind of like learn, so I can develop a background before I end up walking into that.
I would say look up the U.S. Naval Institute's. Wait 1 second. I would say look up anything related to the Naval War College's China Maritime Studies Institute. They produce, I forgot how many studies that they produce, but they have a lot of good knowledge about not only the plan, but also goes deeper into, various ships, various components, like the number of ferries that they would use in a potential Taiwan invasion, the number of what other kinds of vessels that would be used in a Taiwanese invasion, and then also with that, various other articles. Another one would be the Naval Institute as well as a whole. I know they produce a large part of, I know they produce a lot of literature on that specific subject. Another one would be the Office of Naval Intelligence. They produce a guide or an outline of all the planned ships that are available within a given year. Another one would be DIA. They used to push out a good explainer of the PLA every so often, every other year, if I'm not mistaken. That's a good one to gain some foundational knowledge of. Another one will be IISS, which they'll produce some 1,000-foot high strategic notes about the plan, about their carrier program, and various other aspects of the plan as well. Wolf University Studies Institute, RUSI. That's another one that you could look up as well. I know they produce a significant amount of material. They include a ebook that every year that gives a lot of details about essentially all the militaries within the world.
Thank you, man.
You're welcome.
Other questions?
Yeah, I got a question.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I want to ask, so you mentioned something about China, China doing papers on potential uses to like psyops and information warfare against the US. Against other countries. Would you know if we have any results of us trying to do similar disinformation warfare and such with Chinese citizens or soldiers?
Have a good one. Thank you.
You're welcome. With that one, I think I'm going to refer you to a Washington Street or Washington Post article that actually talked about it. Anything beyond that, I can only speculate, which I think we do that. But given how hard it is to even make accounts on Weibo, WeChat, Douyin, PDD, and all the other social media apps out there, it's kind of hard to base. It's kind of hard to base that. It's kind of hard to enter that targeting audience. Not to say that we don't. It's just that it's extremely hard because the pervasive surveillance and the Chinese firewall. And so, and the Washington Post article actually shows how we did that. I want to say in 2021 or 2022, or no. I forgot. I read it like last month, and it was very insightful for people who actually would ask that similar questions to what you asked, because it shows that we can. And two, it shows that how extremely angry the Chinese get whenever they are found to do, whenever they figure out that this occurs.
All right.